Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Lunch and Learn, where we will be talking about BFRBs, also known as body-focused repetitive behaviors. As some of you may know, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, has these obsessive compulsive related disorders. That's hoarding disorder, body dysmorphic disorder, and then two of them are BFRBs. Skin picking, hair pulling is what most people call it, but also trichotillomania, excoriation, disorders is sort of the technical term, but I'm really excited to have an expert on to discuss kind of like the new direction of TLC, an amazing foundation that has been known to help my clients with different BFRBs throughout the years. And so we're going to talk about the new role of CEO, what the direction of the organization is taking. Also, what does the organization offer? What are some resources? And I want people to learn more about BFRBs because, as we know, OCD rarely occurs in a vacuum. Often we have these co-occurring disorders. Also, with body dysmorphic disorder, we also see a lot of skin picking and hair pulling for different reasons. That was my personal experience. So I'm excited to dive all into that. So welcome. We are here live, 9 a.m. on my coast, early in the morning. We're also East Coast, noontime. But this live stream is just one of many. So make sure you're tuning in every Wednesdays here at the IOCDF on all of its different various platforms. Thank you for being here, everyone. This is your live stream. So what I mean by that is whatever you are watching us on, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitch, whether it's X, whether it's YouTube, etc., there's a comment section. Please jump in. Start off by introducing yourself. Where are you from? What are you excited to learn about with BFRBs? Who are you here to support? Are you a clinician? Are you a parent? Are you a person with lived experience? We always like to hear where everybody's from and what they're representing. But throughout the live stream, you can interact with other people that are joining us live in the chat, as well as ask us questions that we'll put on the screen and make sure to get those questions answered. So once again, this is your live stream and you can be as active as you'd like. My name is Chris Trondsen. I am a licensed therapist here in Orange County, California, in Costa Mesa. I also sit on the board of one of the IOCDF's affiliates, OCD SoCal, and I'm on the board of the IOCDF. A lead advocate. I myself have OCD and related disorders, and just excited to host this live stream. As you know, I'm usually joined by a co-host, Liz McIngvale, who runs the OCD Institute in Houston. She currently is in the middle of something. She may join us halfway through. So look out for Liz around in about 25 minutes. She may pop up. If not, she'll be back next week. We're always excited when Liz is here. Before I jump in and introduce my guest, I just want to let everybody know that this is not a crisis hotline. As much as we want to provide, support, community, education, we cannot provide resources for a crisis. So if you're experiencing a current crisis, please dial 988 or go to 988lifeline.org. There you can talk to somebody who is trained in supporting people going through a crisis. You can also reach out to your clinician, your psychiatrist, or go to your local emergency room. But this is being live streamed, so just be kind to everybody and remember this is being recorded. If you don't catch all of it or you'd like to share this recording with anyone, you can go to youtube.com/IOCDF and you can watch this recording back. Well, I am super excited to have my guest on. I'm going to read her bio in a second, but just a personal, the TLC Foundation has been super helpful. Obviously, having clients that have BFRBs as well as co-occurring disorders. A lot of the resources on the website is amazing. There's a lot of different packets and stuff for clients to download. There's a lot of good information on there. So excited to jump in and hear a little bit about the organization. But my guest today is the new chief executive. I don't know how new, but I know newer chief executive officer. Her name is Lamia El-Sadek. She is an experienced strategist, financial executive, international activist, and movement leader with a background in corporate business development and finance and a passion for human rights. Her humanitarian work has taken her through Africa, the Middle East, Australia, and Europe on issues ranging from economic development, displaced and refugees' rights, gender equality, and youth empowerment. She is. I'm going to read a little bit of it, and then I'm going to have Amanda put the whole link in the bio so people can read the full bio. She is studied business management and informed technology and has a master's in training and development from North Carolina State University. She holds a PhD in global leadership from Indiana Institute of Technology, and has served on the board of Ethos, Dignity, and Power Now, NFCC International, and Casa Milagro Foundation. She co-authored a book on global and cross-cultural leadership and is currently working on a book outlining the parallels between recent global revolutions such as the Arab Spring and social movements within the US. Dr. El-Sadek most recently held the position of executive director of both the March for Our Lives Action Fund and the March for Our Lives Foundation. So we're going to put the link to the bio because it's very extremely impressive, as you could see. But the conversations that Lamia had prior to the live stream, just really wanting to bring the peer support and really making sure that people have support in the system. So Lamia, anything I missed? Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you. Hey, Chris, how's it going? It's and thank you for making it so early, your time. Always appreciated.
Yes, well, tell me a little bit where I'd like to start. I went over a little bit about what the BFR. Oh, sorry, my lights just went out. I will fix that in a second. I'm in the dark, but can you tell me a little bit about, first of all, what got your interest? I want to start there because reading your bio, obviously it's super impressive. You've done so much important things, global work. How did you get started with BFRBs? What got you interested in that?
So that's a good question. Hi, Chris, and hi, everybody. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it. So I think one of the things that I kind of really had to do a big pause at was, what the heck are BFRBs? Because I did not know what they were. And so as I was reading about the organization and the position, I had a child who was experiencing some issues, and we had a really hard time getting her diagnosed. And she was misdiagnosed all the time, as is the case with a lot of young kids. And she had several comorbidities. So it was ADHD. Is it autism? Is it this? Is it that? And I could see that she was having like BFRBs. She was biting her nails, she was pulling her hair. And when I came across it, I was just amazed at how very, very little is known about this, and how none of her doctors in multiple states even knew about it or suggested that we look into it. So I did what most parents would do. I went to school on this thing and I started reading up on it. And I joined the organization last year as a CEO. I sit on the board of directors, and I also sit on the scientific advisory board, which is an advisory board of some of the biggest scientists doing work related to BFRBs, where we're always on top of the latest research. We're aware of some of the latest therapies, and I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to the organization in general. But yeah, just the fact that I didn't know about it. It wasn't in any literature I ever read or heard about. It's not on social media. It's not on TV. It's not in any of the movies I watched. It was just one of those things where I was like, what the heck is this? And how come I never knew about it? And the fact that I was seeing it at home, and I was struggling getting support, even with, good healthcare and good doctors. It just, it made me really realize that there is a big need for not only for support, but just for awareness, and for BFRBs to be well known, and to be recognized, and for people to be able to seek support and seek help and just seek knowledge about it.
Yeah, one of the conversations we had briefly before we jumped on was just how behind BFRBs, and I do a lot of work in the body dysmorphic disorder space, and we see that as well, right? Like, even though we know there's so much more need for OCD research, OCD education, OCD treatment, when you look at BFRBs, when you look at other disorders in the OCD spectrum, it's even further behind. So when you are at the organization, you're really talking about strategy. What are you noticing that you hear from people that are reaching out, that are emailing for the people treating it? What are some of the things that you hear that's really missing in this space?
I mean, so I think there are a lot of misconceptions related to it. Primarily the fact that a lot of BFRBs have been experienced by one or almost all of us at some level, and what differentiates that from someone biting their nails or pulling their hair to a BFRB, right? So BFRBs are a group of related disorders. The most common are repetitive self-grooming behaviors. So, pulling your hair, biting your cheek, biting your lip, your nails, but the thing is, most people have experienced that at some level, right? I think there are primates and animals and dogs and cats and birds that do that, where they pick at an insect or they pick at hair or pick at fur. So I think when people start exhibiting BFRBs or they see it in a loved one, it's often difficult to distinguish between, wait, is this what I used to do when I was a kid, where I would just pull my hair, or is this something more? And then combine that with the lack of awareness and the lack of knowledge, and the fact that there's very little literature available at places where you would expect them to be, like, pediatricians and so on. It makes it very difficult for people to recognize that, wait, I might want to look into this. So I think this is one of the things that I would love to just raise awareness and share enough knowledge about it so that people are able to do that. The second biggest thing, which I think we're definitely going to have to talk about later on today, is the stigma associated with it. BFRBs are visible. They are physically visible, right? You're bald, you have no hair, you have no eyelashes, you have no eyebrows, you have scabs. A lot of it is physical. And it becomes very difficult to have agency over when to share that you have a BFRB and with whom, because then people see it and they can ask you, versus other disorders where, you can have your journey and take your time and speak your truth and share it with whoever you want. A lot of times with BFRBs, you feel kind of closed in, like you have to disclose when you're not ready. And of course, it's associated with bullying and many other things, but just the notion that you're going through this journey, it is overwhelming. It's a lot of work that you have to do. And then on top of it, there is the stigma. And then meanwhile, it feels in some cases that the world is watching you, because it is physical. It's not something that you can hide. So just multiple challenges. And with the fact that the onset is often, childhood all the way up until like early adolescence, 12-year-olds and so on. People who are facing that for the first time are usually very young kids or young adults or parents, and handling it becomes very, very challenging, and learning, what to do and where to go. Another challenge is that a lot of therapeutic and medical providers do not know enough about BFRBs. And one of the things that we offer is a virtual training institute where, a therapist can take this training, they get enough knowledge and training to know about BFRBs, because ultimately we do want community members in their own community that actually have a therapist who knows enough to recognize it, knows enough to work with them on it, to develop, a therapeutic plan, or even knows enough to be able to say, okay, I'm going to refer you to someone who is a specialist and know who that person is. So not just working with the community, but also working on the other end, which is who are the providers for those different communities. But yeah.
Yeah, you hit a couple really important topics that I want to expand on. The first one that you spoke about, what I always think is the most difficult is when people are experiencing a disorder that the average person might experience, but to an extreme minute level. And the reason I think that's additionally hard is because, let's say an individual with OCD, right? Most people don't even know the whole spectrum of what OCD really is. But some people will say things like, oh, well, I have OCD. I like to organize my papers, etc. Or with BFRBs, right? Like there are some people that pick their nails a little bit. But when we see people with really severe, there's her name is escaping me right now, but she runs a nonprofit called Picking Me for skin picking. She's an individual with skin picking. But she's shown pictures of like when it was at her worst, and she had like all these bumps on her legs, and the doctors are like, if you don't stop, you might cause like permanent damage. I run support groups. I had somebody in my support group who pulled so much of her hair. She was a pre-Olympic swimmer that she dropped out of Olympic training because when she got her hair wet, it made it more noticeable. And so people experiencing BFRBs to the level of needing to see a clinician, needing community support, needing family support. I mean, this is when it's really, really impacting them. So how do we help get the message out there that, hey, even if you twirl your hair a little bit or maybe bite your nails, or if you get a pimple, you like to pop it, how do we get out to the public like, hey, this is not the same as having that disorder, somebody that's really struggling, that has the shame? How do we let the public know that there's different levels of it and there's people suffering?
Yeah, so I mean, this is a great question. I think that the first line of defense is it has to be therapeutic and medical providers. So we have a directory on our website, and we are asking people to, you work with BFRBs. We're gonna have you a listing so people can go search for you. You do a support group. We're gonna have you a listing. We even have a section of the directory for self-care. So hairdressers who know how to work with folks who have trichomania, who pull their hair, masseuses, people who have enough awareness and enough knowledge. I think surrounding yourself by providers and community members who have that knowledge, I think it makes it seem less foreign and less daunting. And then you begin to unpack it, because there is a lot of unpacking that goes on. A lot of the therapies involved, whether it's cognitive behavior therapy, which is also used with OCD and some of the other therapies, a lot of those are very individual journeys, and the therapist would need to sit with you and talk about, what are the elements, what are the feelings, what are the thoughts associated, what are the triggers. Are you trying to, in some cases it's achieving a goal. Are you doing it to help yourself fall asleep? Are you doing it to relax? Are you doing it because you're achieving a goal? You're in the middle of doing something, and so you're picking at your skin. Like, basically understanding where it's coming from, and what brings it about, what your triggers are, understanding that in many cases your triggers do change with time. So what used to work for you, or what you got the hang up after a while, now it's different. So for instance, we had a teen on one of our support groups, and it's a youth only, it's 13 to 18-year-olds, and they discuss everything. They feel very open, they're not judged, and it's their peers, right? And many of them come from little towns where they are literally the only person with a BFRB. They talk to their school counselor, never heard of it. And one of them was saying that, I thought I kind of understood my triggers, but then we moved, and I start pulling. And the kids were like, okay, just back off. Where is this coming from? What is happening? And so were they like, is it your new house? Is it your new room? Do you have a lot of light? Do you have light sensitivity? Is there a big window next to your bed? And they just unpacked it. It was just very relaxed. And then she was like, I think the bus ride is longer. And so we're like, what does that mean? And she was like, well, I live farther from my school, so the ride is longer. And we're like, okay, what happens on the bus? She's like, well, the kids are really loud. And we're like, huh. And so, sound is a new trigger for her. And she said, the minute I get home, I, throw my books back on the floor. I go to the bathroom, I turn on the big lights right by the mirror, and I start picking. And, the kids were like, maybe get some noise canceling headphones. And, one of the reasons why we love support groups so much is because advice from your peers means so much more than from anyone else. Because she was like, oh, my mom said that. But I was like, but apparently when other kids said it, she was like, I love this idea. I'm going to do this. And we're like, okay, great. But I mean, just the fact that this is something new, and it's almost like a very fluid process. It's constantly changing. You're changing. Your life is changing. Some things that may have been triggers that were really critical at some point, you kind of got the hang of now, and now you're older and you have different triggers, right? Apparently middle school sucks for everybody. And on our support group, a lot of the kids are like, your urges are actually going to go down once you pass middle school. And it's really interesting to see how, within this generation, the younger generation, they're very in tune with everything else that's happening. Of course, access to information and knowledge, and having a support group. But, the older kids, the 16-year-olds talking to the 12-year-olds and seeing that dynamic. And then for them to be able to explain how the triggers change, but so does your ability. And your, just the fact that you're more perceptive now, and you're able to pick up that, wait, this is a new trigger. I might need to write it down. Or, we talk about acceptance and commitment therapy. And, that's one of the major issues related to BFRBs is shame. And, with acceptance and commitment therapy, you accept that you have a BFRB, and, you just accept it. So you figure out that, one of the things that has to do with the need and the urge to pull or pick or whatnot. A lot of it is stemming from the need to be perfect, the need to sell the room. And then you see something that's imperfect, you want to change it. And when you accept that you have a BFRB, it does help a little bit with just let it be, allow yourself to do it, and just don't overcomplicate it, and don't shame yourself more than, because we already know that you're already feeling bad about it. And then once you accept it, then I think that creates a healthier platform where you're then able to actually unpack and learn more about yourself and your triggers and the thoughts and where it's coming from. And then begin to develop, like a plan. Am I going to go with fidgets? Am I more into sensory things? Am I, am I going to create, I think that the habit reversal training, one of the techniques is to create a competing response therapy, which is you find some kind of response that competes with whatever it is that you want to do. So if you're pulling your hair, you can then sit on your hand, or put your hand in a fist, or get up and do something else, or just give your hand something else to do, just a competing response. It's such a small technique, but it works really well. And so we have a lot of kids who are now into crafts, who are into gardening, who are into doing things with their hands, because they feel that we tried fidgets for a while and then it stopped working. So maybe I need something else that's a little bit more sensory. But that journey in itself is fluid, and no journey is the same from one person to the next. But then they share a lot of the similar themes, which is why I think having that support system is really critical.
Yeah. Real quick, I want to put up, because I know people join at all times. Amanda, if you could put up Cash's question at 12:19. So Cash asked, what is a BFRB? So for those that are newer joining us, because we did, I want to make sure that people who joined us know what it is. What we're talking today is body-focused repetitive behaviors, what are known as BFRBs. The common ones, I'll kind of use like the more common terms versus like the DSM term, but typically skin picking, hair pulling. It also can be nail picking or nail biting. I had it when I was a kid. I used to bite the inside of my cheek. So it's these repetitive behaviors. And it falls under the OCD. Somebody was asking, is it OCD? It falls under the OCD spectrum disorders. So the boring part of it as a clinician, when we look in the DSM, you have OCD, but you have these obsessive compulsive related disorders, and skin picking, hair pulling, which are BFRBs, are under that umbrella. And it's because we see some similar things, but you really, hit on it when you were talking about some of the other reasons people have it. I think with OCD, we find it typically when people are anxious, stressed. But as you said, I mean, sometimes people will skin pick, hair pull because they're bored, because they're tired, because it's a soothing behavior. And so that's one of the things that I think you hit on that was really important, is that not everybody is going to do this because of anxiety. Some people do. As you were giving the example, somebody's stressed because of certain triggering noises and change with moving. That may be a soothing behavior. Some people do it, they're bored. They find that, hey, usually when I watch TV, I kind of space out and I start kind of pulling this patch of hair. You talked about support groups, which is great. I run 3, and I think support groups are amazing because you get to see people hear from their peers, like you said. And shout out to all the parents. I know you're a mother as well. Kids will never listen to you, but they will listen to their peers, right? Mm-hmm. So getting advice and getting stuff like that from your peers is great. And I think that's important for our audience to know. If you're really struggling with a BFRB or any of these disorders, even if you don't like talking to people or, opening up, it is different in a support group that is well ran because you are with your peers and you're able to get advice from others. You touched on it a little bit, and I'd love to expand more on the treatment. But before we get to that, the stigma, the shame. So you were talking about how the support groups help with that. Why do you think in this country we have such shame around mental health conditions? Because, if somebody we know or we love is going through a medical condition with their heart, with cancer, they injured their leg, they need help kind of moving around with mobility, people want to jump in, help, support, no questions asked. With a BFRB specifically, but any mental health condition, there's often shame, there's stigma, there's embarrassment. What are you noticing in the community that you serve at the TLC Foundation? What are some of the reasons that people are experiencing shame and stigma, and what have you found to be helpful?
So, I mean, I think the stigma around mental and psychological disorders in general is something that we've been battling for many years, right? As you said, a person can have a number of physical ailments or conditions, and all they would receive would be support. Nobody would question their ability to think rationally. Nobody would question their ability to handle their affairs, their emotions. It is very different with mental and psychological disorders, and I think this is a big part of um, this campaign that we're doing constantly. We have a conference coming up. We just really want people to become more and more aware of the fact that mental and psychological disorders do not impede with your ability to be a functioning person, to go to school, to have a life, to have kids, to do everything that you need to do. If anything, it's a bigger challenge because oftentimes you're doing it alone, because in many cases of the shame that just society has forced upon us, right? So even in pop culture, you still find references and jokes made in movies and songs and so on about, this person is that or that. It's a cuss word to be labeled something specific, right? So one of the things that we're hoping to do is to work. So we have 4 monthly support groups. We have one for parents only, and I'll talk some more about it. We have one for youth only, 13 to 18-year-olds. We have one for child and parent. So anyone younger than 13, we would want a parent to be present, and then for them to see other kids. And then we have one for adults with BFRBs. And what we're hoping to do is, while we're working across all of the groups, we're really hoping to work with the younger generation so that hopefully by the time 10, 15 years from now, we're going to have a very different landscape, because those kids are going to be artists, they're going to be writers, they're going to be professors, they're going to be accountants, they're going to be parents, they're going to be everybody in society. And what we're working with them on is just shattering that shame and dismantling the systems that many of us just inherited. And we see it in the other groups because, a lot of times it's intergenerational. So we would find someone in the adults with BFRB group who's like, my parent had trichotillomania, she pulled her hair. She handled it really poorly. It was in the 60s or 70s. She didn't know what to do. There was no resources around. Everybody, thought she was doing it to herself, and she intentionally was harming herself. And, versus me now as an adult who's going through it. And then we also have adults whose kids have it, and they're able to reflect on, wait a minute, my 15-year-old is handling this so much better than I did. Like, they're having agency over this. They're like, yeah, I have it. So what? They're walking up to their friends and talking about it. They're making it cool. They're wearing all the cool wigs and, talking about cool things. So what we're really hoping to do is, by continuing to work with community members across different generations, but specifically the younger one, as well as providers, hopefully we're going to normalize it and then change that, just change that tune, change that attitude towards it, where it becomes common and well known, and it becomes just like self-care, right? Like 10 years ago, was anyone talking about self-care, right? Like now it's almost normalized in many places where you're like, I'm taking a self-care day off, right? Back in the day, in the 80s, for sure, it would have been considered like, okay, you're just slacking off, you're going to do your hair, whatever it is, right? It would have been belittled, versus now where it's considered, no, you need to do this to become a healthy and productive member of society and of my company or my organization. So we're really working hard to change those attitudes. But I think one of the things related to shame also, in addition to the physical aspect of it, is that a lot of people who are not familiar with BFRBs assume it's your choice. You're doing it. And we were once discussing the difference between BFRBs, for instance, and vitiligo, right? They're both physical. You can see it on somebody's face, for instance, right? But vitiligo, they suffer from the shame of, vitiligo and how it looks and all of this. But the missing component is, nobody accuses someone who has vitiligo of, oh, relax, you're doing it to yourself. Just stop. Just get over it. Just keep yourself busy. Why can't you keep yourself busy? Why can't you get a job? Why can't you do that, right? As if it's, and I think that whether it's OCDs or BFRBs, that's something that a lot of people fail to recognize, is that it is compulsive and it's not something that you can recognize. And one of the things that we work with sufferers of BFRBs, on is, knowing when you're doing it, because for many people, they don't know they're doing it, right? And in many cases they know, but they're not able to stop, and not recognizing that this is something that's out of their hands is making the problem more difficult. Because when they do share it and disclose it with, loved ones or friends, some of the attitudes they're met with is, and you can't get a hand up, like as we discussed earlier, right? Like, I bite my lip and I stopped when I was 10, right? So a lot of times you find this ridicule of, you're not over this yet, you didn't outgrow this. And it's very difficult when you have things that look the same but they're not. And then to be able to explain to people, not the same thing, right? Like, yes, there are some similar elements, but they're not the same thing. These are urges, and just the fact that people don't have a good understanding of it is something that we're really hoping to change with time. But I think the other thing related to shame is, ultimately it has to do with our self-image. A lot of people growing up, we struggle with self-image. We struggle with it even as adults, right? And so here comes BFRBs that are physical. That are, you can see them manifest on your appearance, and it becomes this challenge of, looking at it in the right perspective, and the understanding that, this is something that you're going to work on, and you're not alone, and you have this support group, and this community that would help you. But, going to the parents and the family aspect of it, I think, families having a good understanding of it, and understanding exactly what the role is really critical. So for instance, in the family, and the parents only support group, sometimes on our agenda we would be talking about themes such as fixing versus supporting. As a parent, you want to fix all the time, and sometimes that just adds this pressure. So for instance, somebody shared that, she saw her daughter, she was heading out the door and she wasn't wearing her hat. And she said, I know, every time she leaves the house not wearing her hat, she has a horrible day. All the kids at school, make comments. She comes home and she's upset. And so she's like, I was looking at her, I see her, she's about to go to school. And I'm like, should I say something? Should I not? And she ended up saying something, and her daughter got really upset. And so she was like, how did this even happen? My daughter ended up having a really bad day either way. And, so it's also helpful because as someone who has a loved one, a child or a family member with a BFRB, sometimes you really don't know what to do. And, in your mind, it's like, if I remind you, you would stop. When in many cases, it just makes people feel even more self-conscious. And in this case, you're self-conscious from someone who's very close to you. So it makes it even more difficult. Someone who has access to you, someone who you're vulnerable when you're around them. Like, you can put an armor on when you go to school, when you go to work, but at home, you're just doing your thing. You're thinking about the test you have on second period, right? And then your mom makes a comment like this and you're like, whoa, I did not see that coming, right? So we talk about some of those themes. And then we also talk about how different parents and different family members handle it differently, right? So parents would bring up, I have other kids, and the siblings don't know, how to address it. They don't know what to do about it. So we talk about this. We also talk about, sometimes you would have a family where one of the parents is like, my child is fine. There's no issue. Nothing is going on. We're not talking about this. So they don't go to the appointments. They don't go to the support groups. They don't discuss it. They don't address it at all. And in their mind, this is just how I can handle it. This is how I'm coping with it. But in a lot of times, they're also thinking that, I'm making my child feel less self-conscious. And they're thinking, why not trying to fix it like the other parent is, I'm helping. Meanwhile, the parent is feeling even more lonely because she or he is the one who's taken on all of the support groups, the appointments, staying on top of the literature. So this is all to say that family members absolutely need the support as well, because they don't know how to help. They don't know how to support the person they love, but then it also does take a toll on them and on the rest of their family dynamics. So parents can actually say this at a parents only group without the guilt, right? Because as a parent, oftentimes you have the guilt. It's just regardless. It's just, parent guilt. So, we talk about like, it's okay to just vent. We're all here the same. Just talk about whatever you're talking about. It doesn't mean you love your child less, or, or any of those things. And it does help because they do need to unpack and unwind. And it helps to see parents whose kids are a little older and they got a better handle on some of the triggers. And then they're like, oh my God, really? So this happens? And your son is 18 now and he's doing better. And right? So just being able to see people going through it at different stages, and just pick up, lived experiences and best practices is also really helpful.
Yeah, support groups are amazing. One of the support groups I run with my mom, we run one of the largest OCD support groups in the country. We usually have about 175 families attend, and there's so much need for family support. And these are such family disorders. I mean, a BFRB, like you explained right there, right? Like people are having young kids go to school. Maybe kids are asking questions or making fun of them, coming home crying. You want to fix it, like you said, as a parent. You might say the wrong thing. They're also teenagers. Like there's all this struggle. And I think what's always amazing about support groups, and I saw that Amanda put in the chat the links so people can go to the TLC Foundation and definitely get look at the support groups you offer. But I encourage anybody watching this that either has a BFRB or a child with one, definitely to look at those support groups, because there are so much information, community support. It's amazing. One thing that you touched on is the training that the TLC Foundation does for clinicians. So important. We do some stuff like that, obviously through the IO staff, we do that for OCD and BDD and stuff. And it is so important because clinicians are wanting to support and help. They might get a client that comes in with a BFRB and they're lost, where they get training. So if a clinician wants to get training, can you walk through a little bit of what they would get from the TLC's foundation in terms of training to become a well-informed clinician when working with BFRBs?
Sure. So we have a virtual training program that we used to offer in person. And we're actually thinking of going back and offering it in person. But for now, we're hoping that it's more accessible online. So you take the training program, you have all of the reading materials, and this training has been developed by Dr. Mansueto, John Piacentini, Suzanne Autumn. So some of the biggest names in the BFRB community, specialists who work with children and adolescents and family members, and have actually helped develop some of the treatments that we're talking about. So once you take that training, we actually update your listing in the directory, because one of the search criteria is you can look for someone in your city or in your state who does therapy via phone or is licensed in your state, but you can also look for someone who has taken the training. And for like, I once had a therapist who I think he was licensed in Texas, and then he got licensed in a different state, and he was like, hey, can you update my listing? And this is something that we do regularly. And in his case, he actually came back with some great feedback. He was like, in the 4 days since you updated my listing to I think it was Florida, the new state, I had at least like 5 families reach out. So this is fantastic for him. It's fantastic for us. But what's even more important is that those are 5 families who before that point had no one to go to, right? Or they had one less person to go to. So for us, the way we're approaching this is the more we educate and raise awareness around BFRB, especially with therapeutic and medical providers, the more chances we're going to have people looking into this, doing research. One of the really exciting most exciting research that came out, I think it was March, is from the University of Chicago with Dr. John Grant, where they're looking at memantine, which is an Alzheimer's medication. And the research has shown that it did help with the urges related to BFRBs. Without increasing knowledge around BFRBs and getting more therapists and doctors and researchers to learn about it and research it and look into evidence-based treatments and modalities, we're not gonna, it's going to stop where it is now. So the fact that we're hoping that this will continue to evolve and just enrich the literature and the knowledge we have. But also just, again, having families who before that day didn't have access to one this one therapist. so at our upcoming conference, we have a scientific track, and we're offering continuing education credits, but we're hoping to actually invite a lot of therapists and researchers who are, some of the biggest names with the BFRB world, but also to invite a lot of folks who don't know enough about BFRBs, and for them to come and take this crash course with some of the biggest scientists and researchers, and to learn about it, and then to go back home, hopefully, and then educate their peers and share knowledge, and be able to sit with one of their patients and say, hey, I was just at a conference in DC and I met Miss Tennessee and she has a BFRB. You know what that could do to a 12-year-old girl or boy who's suffering from BFRB and their self-image, and to learn that, wait, you can be anything you want to be, but you don't necessarily associate BFRBs or anything related to that with someone who's Miss Tennessee, for instance, who's our keynote speaker. But just the idea of understanding and having a well-rounded understanding of what BFRBs mean to you now, but also when you grow up, and seeing those different presentations, because again, presentation matters, right? And it's really, really critical for this to happen. And we're hoping to create a space where having a BFRB, you're not the minority in the room anymore, which is often the case for a lot of our community members, especially a lot of the kids. And just to go to a place where, everyone around you has it, and to talk to them, and to be free. You can wear your wig. You don't have to just do whatever it is you want to do. Talk freely about it. Make friends, make lifelong friends. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm looking at the website right now. So it's in Washington, D.C. It's October 5th and the 6th. And, for people watching, we're talking about BFRBs. There's more than just the ones we've covered. Obviously, we've talked about hair pulling, but people also can eat their hair, skin pick and eat and scratch. There's nail biting. There's nail picking, cheek biting, lip biting, picking, licking, tongue chewing. There's nose picking, eating, all these other BFRBs. And it's a big community that's going. Parents, siblings, spouses, partners, friends, loved ones, mental health clinicians, medical provider, educators. So obviously, if you're in the DC area, but even if you're not, think about going. I mean, I always think, conferences make it so different. And I just love the pictures that you have kind of representing the people that attend, because obviously my clients that have BFRBs, a lot of times they're embarrassed because they might have patches of hair missing, or they have, certain markings on their face from skin picking and stuff. But it's a way to go and be around your peers that are experiencing the same thing, that will not judge and want nothing from support. So super, super excited about the conference. I know it's going to be September soon, but October is going to creep up on you. I mean, how is the TLC Foundation feeling about the upcoming conference?
I mean, I think we're excited. It's our first conference in person after a few years with COVID and everything. We're super excited, and we have so many people coming from all over the country, but also we have folks coming from Latin America. Someone's coming from Japan, Oxford. So it looks like there's definitely a need for it. And one of the things that we absolutely love just serving the community with is wearing those two hats, where we're able to provide support for the community, but then also we work for practitioners, and we have the science and the research aspect of it. So we're hoping that out of this conference, we're going to have so many amazing things that I mentioned before, but then maybe one or two opportunities for collaboration, right? Where researchers meet and they're attending those sessions and they're like, I have this idea, I have this donor, let's do it, let's work on it. And then before you know it, there's a new study. That's what we're hoping to do is while we continue to serve the community, but also maybe serve as an incubator for, potential future collaborations and just modalities.
Yeah. There was a question from Spence Robert at 1246. Is pica a kind of BFRB? If people aren't familiar with pica is a disorder where people will eat non-edible objects. So sometimes it can be like a nail, sometimes it can be like paper, sometimes it can be coins, as somebody that I worked with. Typically, it does fall under more of an eating and feeding disorder than it does a BFRB. There's some great information. I'll put a link in the chat. There's a good article. I'm trying to do two things at once. I never am good at speaking, typing, and stuff like that. But I'm going to have us to put it up in the chat. But it falls under more of an eating and feeding disorder. So it tends to be with children is often when I see it. And could be like dirt, like kids that eat dirt. Sometimes we hear kids that eat glue and stuff like that. So foods that have no nutritional value. So I would put an article for that. I'm super excited about your conference. I'm so glad that you guys are going to be back, because obviously, as you know, like such a big part of the BFRB community is going to be that in-person connection, which is absolutely incredible. You did talk about the treatments. You went into the treatment, and obviously, a lot of people that are going to stumble upon the TLC Foundation are because they're desperate. They're feeling a little bit like there's no hope out there. With the treatment and hearing stories, you talked about Dr. Charles Mansueto, who's a good friend of ours. I mean, just all these people doing the research and stuff. Is there hope? Are people getting better? Do you see people finding the different treatments out there, giving them, some of their power back and helping them manage the disorder?
Yeah, I think so. I had a meeting the other day with someone who has been pull free for 26 years, and we try not to say pull free because it is very well intentioned, but it also gives this it's nothing or all kind of approach to it, and it's okay to pull every once in a while. Success doesn't mean not pulling at all, but I mean, yeah, there are absolutely there's so many wonderful examples of people who have learned to manage it in a way. I think it's just traditionally we are used to having a cure for everything. And I think that for what we're discussing, there is no cure, but there's so many treatment modalities and approaches and things that in many cases are very individual. And that's where investing that work and working with your therapist or even talking with your loved ones and just trying to unpack what is it that works for you that may not work for someone, right? Someone might love the comprehensive behavior training model. Someone else might love the acceptance and commitment therapy. Someone else might love the dialectical behavior, which is just don't indulge, period, right? And I think like one of the examples is if you find yourself wanting to pull, just give yourself 15 minutes. Make this deal with yourself. Say, I'm gonna give myself 15 minutes where I don't pull, and then I'll give myself permission to do it again. So now you have given yourself permission. So you're relaxed, you're not agitated, you're not anxious, which makes it worse in many cases. And then you're left with, what do I do for 15 minutes? So sometimes people get up, they garden, they watch a movie, and before you know it, in many cases, the 15 minutes has passed, which is always a win-win. But it's just learning what works for you, right? And it's very individual, which honestly, this is how everything is. Everything that we do is very individual, and owning it and having agency and being a part of the treatment process that works for you individually. I think it's one of I think this is one of the reasons why I'm very optimistic because it's not like, all right, so there's this pill, take it, give it to everybody else, is going to work, which we know doesn't work for anything in life. But knowing that you as a person, you are the partner, you are the person who's actually leading this process. And you have access to something that maybe we don't have access to. You know your feelings, you know the elements, you know any trauma, you know your hormonal challenges, you know everything, right? And while you're working with your therapist or even your support group, you have access and you can tap into this really critical like knowledge base. And who else is better than you to actually be like, okay, this works and this doesn't. That's why journaling is such a really critical part of the process for many people, because once you're aware of what brings it about and what days and what places and what temperature and what weather and what noise triggers, right? Like once you're aware of all the different elements, I think it's going to help you on the long run.
Yeah, no, I mean, I briefly told you before we started the live stream, but I have, I had 2 BFRBs. When I was a kid, it was definitely the cheek biting. And in fact, still to this day as an adult, I don't do it anymore, but I can feel the dead skin on my inner cheek. And anytime I go to the dentist, well, not anymore because I've seen the same dentist forever. But when I first started seeing dentists, they would say, oh, you have this accumulation of kind of dead skin on your inner cheek. Did you bite your inner cheek when you were a kid? And it was like, yes, I used to do it when I was a kid. And it was actually a therapist. And what they told me to do is instead of bite, what if you rubbed? Use your tongue to like rub that area. And it created the same soothing sensation without causing damage to my inner cheek. But the one that I dealt with an adult is I was definitely a skin picker. And like you said, what was really helpful for me is to identify like what happened before the skin picking started. So often it would be me kind of like feeling and rubbing my skin. If I felt like some kind of bump, I'd kind of pick at it, and then I'd go into the bathroom, turn on the bright lights. I used to have like tweezers. I would pick at the skin with the tweezers and pop it. And then, that was my skin picking. And obviously, like many of the people that you help, it would cause little scars. It would cause more acne, more bumps. And what was really helpful for me is like I needed a competing behavior because I just kept doing it, and actually seeing a dermatologist who's like, look, this is causing some damage. Here's some of these cleaning pads, and you can rub it gently if you need to, but it won't do as much damage. But what was more helpful is getting the tweezers out of the house, you delaying, like you said, the 15 minutes, right? So if I felt the urge to pick, I would delay and make sure that I didn't go straight to the bathroom. I didn't ever turn on the bright lights. I kept the bathroom door open because I was less likely to pick if family was there. So it was just a complete like lifestyle change. It was doing an alternative behavior. And just overall ended up, not because the start of it was me being bored watching TV, rubbing my face to find bumps. So really working on all that different behavior, and the acceptance and commitment component helps because I'd feel that buildup of like tension. I wanted to do something, but accepting that feeling is going to be co-occurring with me, and I can choose to do a different behavior. I can commit to do the tools that I had. So the good news is, like you said, I think we're so used to hearing the word cure because everybody wants a cure, right? Like, polio, like let's cure polio, right? But it's really just learning how to manage it. And then I think people can, like myself and some of the people that you've talked about, can get to a point where like I haven't skin picked, probably in like 15 years, right? I mean, you can get to that point where you can really, really manage it. So there's hope. In the remaining time, what I'd really like to hear from you is kind of to wrap us up, like where do you see the TLC Foundation going? Obviously, you are now the CEO. Obviously, Dr. El-Sadek, like reading your bio, you've had so much experience in the world and done such incredible things. Where do you see the future of the TLC Foundation? What do you hope it becomes for the public that needs it?
I mean, I think the future is going to be doing what we've been doing, but then adding a lot of more components. One of the panels that we're having at the conference is going to be focusing on cultural differences around access to knowledge and then access to treatment. I think it's something that we would need to really look into, how some communities, but specifically communities of color, don't have any access or any knowledge even till this day. But also just recognizing that we have different models of treatment that might work for different groups and different ethnicities and backgrounds, and understanding that. A more inclusive approach, I think it's something that I really care deeply about. There are many other groups and wonderful groups and organizations that work within the BFRB space, and I would love to just continue to serve the community. And I think leadership comes through service, not through we're the oldest organization or the biggest or the smallest or right. So I would love to just continue to work and collaborate with as many organizations as possible. And as I mentioned, whether it's through the training program, whether it's through the directory, even the conference, just maintaining that platform where researchers and scientists have a place to go to and talk and collaborate, and then urging them, whether it's through us as an organization or any of the scientific advisory board members, Mansueto, John Grant, all of those amazing folks, just being able to use the leadership and their mentorship to actually help this new generation of researchers who are going to continue research and continue to learn more, and educate us about what BFRBs mean, and whether SSRIs are the only medication out, or different kind of therapies, or just having a better understanding, so that when someone is diagnosed, they can actually make an informed decision and learn and see everything that's out there and see what works for them.
Yes. And I know you talked about, obviously, the therapist provider list on the website. You've talked about support groups in the conference. What are some other things people, when they access your website, because I have it in the background and it's beautiful, and I've sent clients there as well. What are some of the other things that you think that you've heard that have been helpful on the website that people can access?
I mean, believe it or not, a lot of times we get emails from people who are like, I don't know what to do. I'm just overwhelmed. And sometimes, the easiest thing to find is the contact on the website. But then we have to redirect them and we say, okay, what are you looking for? Where you live, you can search for here. What are you looking for a hairdresser? You're looking for a therapist? You're looking for information. Here is the frequently asked questions. You're looking for research. We're posting all of the research. We're doing monthly blogs. We're doing 4 free support groups every month. Just letting people know of what's out there has been something that we care deeply about. I think the journey oftentimes is very overwhelming, and we are very happy to be the one just directing you and helping you find information when possible. So website has access to a lot of misconceptions, myths, and all of this. It has a lot of resources. It has some amazing research that's been out there. So just taking your time and unpacking, it's all there in one place. And we can also help direct you where to look. And then when you're ready to have that support, we have the support groups. Our social media is very active. So people on Instagram and Facebook are often commenting on our posts and stuff. But really just having that presence, just being there for people, and then whatever their need may be at any time, just being there for them. So we do not give medical advice, of course. When we get an email and it says, my son was just diagnosed, we cannot tell you what you need to do, but we can help you to find someone who would then invest time and learn about the case and then help you better.
Yeah, no, it's a very robust website. And you even touched briefly about something that's important. People with BFRBs finding a hairstylist that they don't feel embarrassed to go to, that has sensitivity and understanding of people with BFRBs. Well, thank you so much, Dr. El-Sadek, for being on here. Obviously, one of the things that the OCD under Liz Lindley's leadership is really trying to make these connections with organizations doing amazing work. I know everybody that I work with out here in Southern California is always referring, clinicians to get trained from the TLC Foundation, clients to get access to information on the TLC website. So it's so important that we have these collaborations, because we know that co-occurring disorders with OCD and BFRBs are very common. And so it's great work that you're doing, both for clinicians, both for, as well as people with. And you talked a lot just about your personal experience, but parents and family members need to know how to support their loved one. Any final thoughts about the future of BFRB treatment, or anything hopeful for? Just some final thoughts for the people watching this, whether it's a parent, an interested clinician, or somebody living with a BFRB.
I think that the takeaway from speaking to hundreds and thousands of people with BFRBs is that it's important to remember that you're not alone. Up to 4% of Americans have BFRB, so we're looking at 26 million people. It's not often something that's disclosed. You don't know about it. But it's really important to remember that you're not alone. So, one of the kids in our support group was saying that she got up and she was speaking in front of her class, and she was talking about her BFRB, and she really wanted her teacher and everybody else to understand where she's coming from. And after class, one of the cheerleaders came up to her and she's like, I think I have what you have. I just didn't know it has a name. So it's just really important to remember that what you're going through, most often than not, there is someone around you. That 4% who has it, and just that you're not alone. So we're here, and we'll continue to develop more services and more support for the community.
Awesome. Well, amazing. So I hope everybody that watched this obviously heads over the TLC Foundation website, which is, I have it up, BFRB.org. So BFRB.org. Please check that out. There's a lot of information on the homepage about the upcoming October conference in DC, as well as a therapist. You're able to look up therapists that are highly trained in this. There's training for clinicians. There's so much good work. And obviously, Dr. El-Sadek, we're so excited to see the direction of the TLC Foundation under your CEO leadership and the collaboration with the IOCF. We really appreciate you having on. Please check out the website. There's more information about Dr. El-Sadek's background as well, and a lot of really good resources. Thank you so much. And if you or somebody is struggling with a BFRB, please get help. head over to the TLC Foundation website, and you can always share this live stream. It's going to be up on youtube.com/IOCDF. Thank you for hanging us out. We're here every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, and then the clinician live streams are Wednesdays at 12 noon Eastern. Thanks, and check out iocdf.org for anything OCD and related disorders. And thanks again, Dr. El-Sadek, for being on the show. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.